Hi all, happy Monday. Welcome to The Wife of Caesar. My name is Michel Levien, or Michel Levien, either's fine. As you know, The Wife of Caesar is a Steiner's project to talk about corruption or anti-corruption using everyday words so that we can fight corruption in our day-to-day lives with a little bit more than just good intentions. As in every show, we will talk about a piece of news, a case, and a typology, and everything or almost everything has to do with Russia. Now, the news is that Russia's cabinet, the entire cabinet, has resigned. Now, this happened over the course of last week, but it is very important news. And why is that, you may ask? Well, what happened here is that President Vladimir Putin was in the middle of his address, his State of the Union address, which is essentially a governmental report that he delivers to the legislative body, the Congress of Russia. In this report, he accounts to Congress for the decisions made over the course of the previous year. And in the context of this State of the Union address, Putin explained to the Russian Congress that he wished to enact several constitutional reforms, or several reforms at the constitutional level. Now, the reforms proposed, or the amendments proposed, have to deal with the way the balance of power in Russia. And the main points or the key reforms have to deal with how long presidential terms are, whether or not a president can serve consecutive terms, which in Russia is limited to 2 terms. What types of powers are wielded by the Duma, the Constitutional Congress of Russia, and what degree of importance Russia gives to international treaties. So everything is really suspicious. Now, what happens as for the terms or the number of consecutive terms that a president can serve in Russia, one would do well to remember that since the enactment of the Russian Constitution in 1993, the then President Boris Yeltsin left his office to President Putin, who then appointed Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev. Now, these two have been friends forever, and they have essentially traded places, or they have essentially taken turns being the president and the prime minister, respectively. That means that Vladimir Putin will be president, and then Medvedev will be prime minister, and the next term they will switch, and they have done so since 1993, effectively remaining in power for several years. Now, again, today, a Russian president can serve 2 consecutive terms, and Mr. Putin is wanting to change this to allow him to serve more than 2 consecutive terms, which is very, very suspicious. Let's talk a little bit about international treaties. International treaties are just agreements that are reached between 2 countries. So 2 countries get together and they agree on something. So it's like a contract, or they are like contracts. And sometimes we call them accords and sometimes we call them treaties, but essentially they are agreements. And because 2 countries agree to something, that means that that something now becomes law. Not to get too technical, but that law must then be enforced within the country, and the country is faced with the decision, well, is this treaty higher, equal, or lower to our own constitution? Constitution is the highest law of the land. And there are several schools of thought on this. Different countries adopt different postures or different positions, but Russia is, at the time, Russia treats international treaties as equal to their constitution. So whenever there is a conflict between Russian law and an international treaty, they have to follow the international treaty because it has the same power as the constitution. If the amendments proposed by Mr. Putin are enacted, this might change, allowing the Russian constitution to be higher in value and in power to international treaties. And this is a problem, and this is very, very suspicious and troublesome, because a lot of international treaties deal with humanitarian issues and human rights. So essentially, sometimes countries get together and say, well, humans have the right to this and this and that, and you have to enforce that within your country. However, if the Russian constitution becomes higher than international treaties only as applied to Russia internally, then the Russian authorities, the Russian government, might be free to disregard human rights that are contained in international treaties. And as it stands today, Russia has a very, let's say, questionable record concerning human rights, and this might make this situation even more dire. Now, in the context of this announcement, at the very same time, in front of the cameras and in front of the Russian Congress, then Prime Minister Medvedev took the floor, and he announced that in this context, in the context of these proposed reforms, the government, the cabinet of the government of Russia, so essentially the prime minister and every member of cabinet, every single secretary of state, had to resign. It's a form of protest. They are essentially saying we cannot stand by while something like this happens. Now, President Putin did not even skip a beat. He didn't seem shocked at all. He took the floor. He thanked Prime Minister Medvedev for his work, and he said that he was thankful for everything that had been accomplished, even though not everything had been accomplished. And he now has proposed an interim prime minister in a member of the Russian tax authority or tax agency has been proposed to take office as prime minister or as interim prime minister. And this proposition to take these constitutional reforms to a referendum is still on track. Obviously, we can't know how this will end, but we will definitely know if and when these reforms are voted. Okay, let's move on to the case. And today we get to talk about the Troika laundromat. Now, Troika is just short for Troika Dialogue, which is a bank. Today, it's called Sberbank. And it's a financial institution in Russia that is owned by the Russian government, so it's a state-owned entity, or sometimes known as SOEs. And they deal in financial services. They do investment banking, so trading, buying and selling of securities, bonds, investment vehicles, all that good stuff. Now, what happened here is a journalistic investigation revealed that the Troika Dialogue was helping several people launder money and move money out of Russia by helping them incorporate shell companies. For those of you who don't remember, we've discussed shell companies in previous episodes. They are essentially empty companies, empty legal persons that serve as vehicles to commit illegal acts. Now, the executives at Troika Dialogue helped several people move around $26 billion outside of Russia, and obviously mask them in under several layers of shell companies, shell organizations, trusts, and other corporate vehicles to essentially help them hide where the money was coming from so that they could bring back that money to Russia with the appearance of it being clean money and obviously keeping that money away from the reach of Russian authorities. Now, again, we have to look back to Russia's history. In the early 90s, when the Soviet Union collapsed, there was a period of time where several institutions, several agencies of government were not functioning at full strength. And this is obvious and this is natural when such a power upheaval takes place. When something as big as the Russian government is changing entirely, you're going to miss a few steps. Only a few things, such as intelligence services, security services, things dealing with nuclear weapons, those did not miss a beat, but other functions in government were essentially hindered for a few months or maybe even as little as a few weeks. Now, and this was also the case with state-owned entities and financial services. What happened then is that what we now know as the oligarchs, which is a group of 20-something, 25, 27 people in Russia decided to abscond with everything. They decided to take everything. They saw a big opportunity to take control, power, funds, or a mix of the three, and they stole all of that from the government of the former Soviet Union, now the Russian Federation. They acted very quickly, removed that money or the funds, the securities, even sometimes weapons from Russia to launder elsewhere, and became in the process became billionaires almost overnight. And these people are what we know as oligarchs. Extremely well-connected people, extremely corrupt people, extremely dangerous people. Okay, now, when the oligarchs took charge, one of the ways they did it, one of the ways they took out all of this money, allegedly half of Russian private wealth was taken by these oligarchs. They used different vehicles, and one such vehicle was the Troika laundromat. These executives helped the oligarchs remove the money away from Russia, to launder it, and then to bring it back to Russia freshly clean. And now they control pretty much the entire industry of Russia. Okay, let's move on to the typology. And today we get to talk about powers of attorney. Now, powers of attorney are a legal vehicle, a legal contract that are used in pretty much every country in the world. And they allow one person to ask another person to act on her behalf, to act legally on her behalf. Sometimes also referred to as agency. Now, what happens here is, let's say that person A wants to do something, but cannot do it personally or will not do it personally. And so she asks person B to do it for her. There might be a consideration. There might be some money involved. Not necessarily. The B could be acting for free. What A needs to do is to go to a notary or something similar to a notary. So essentially, sign a piece of paper granting powers to B, legal powers to B, and most of the time that piece of paper has to be notarized or somewhat attested, witnessed by someone with some type of government power to make it official. Now, with this power of attorney, now B can act on behalf of A. And the acting refers to carrying out legal acts such as buying and selling of securities, opening and closing of bank accounts, selling a piece of land, property, a house, an apartment, several different things. And this is complicated, but it's a very useful and relatively easy way of allowing a person to do several things at once, sometimes through other people. And there's nothing essentially wrong with it. However, it can be abused, as with most things. So let's say that A wants to pay a bribe to B. Well, she would not necessarily pay the bribe directly to B, but she might go to C, a third party that is somehow connected to B, not directly, not a relative, sometimes a friend. This is what we generally call straw man, and we've discussed straw man in other episodes. So A goes to C and instead grants that power of attorney to C to allow C to, let's say, control a bank account, right? This person has full powers to control and, take drafts on that bank account, use the money however she pleases, and she doesn't have to account for her use of the money. Now, this piece of paper, this power of attorney, obviously will become filed and registered before the authorities, but there is no evidence or there is no clear intent of a corrupt relationship between A and C, because this is, again, completely legal. This is something that you might do for a family member or a friend or a parent or, another person for whom you want to act. Now, C controls that bank account or that property or that apartment or that house or that whatever. And C does exactly what B tells him to do. So in effect, B controls the account. And this is why we call them effective beneficiaries or effective owners, because even though B's name does not appear anywhere, she or he can actually control what happens with that account or that house or that apartment or that whatever. So in effect, in reality, A has transferred control of the house or the thing of value to B without leaving a paper trail behind. Now, this might seem complex, but it's one of the easiest ways to pay bribes to public officials and to do so in the dark without having to resort to using complicated financial vehicles such as bank accounts and tax havens and the like. Okay, so that's it for today. Thank you for joining us. As always, please blow the whistle. You should know that every act of corruption should be denounced, but you should do so safely. If you're not sure whether or not what you're looking at is corruption, or you're not sure that your physical security is guaranteed, don't do anything. Refrain from acting and try to reach out to someone who might help you first. Feel free to reach out to us at info@striner.mx and we will be glad to help you. But above all, please stay safe. Again, this has been The Wife of Caesar. My name is Michel Levien, or Michel Levien. Either's fine. And you have a happy Monday.